Our focus for this lecture shall be levels of organization of life. Every living thing has its own level of organization. That is where we have the unicellular organisms and the multicellular organisms. So the level of organization of life range from the cell to the tissue, from the tissue to the organ, from the organ to system, and from system to organisms. I'm still your biology teacher, Mr. Omotosho, and I'll be taking you through this lecture. Every organism has referred to as what? The cell. So, and cell is the smallest unit of life, and it is what? The simplest unit of life. So, for the fact that a living thing has cell, it classifies them to be what? To be alive. And the second one is when you now talk about what? The tissue. So tissues, they are a group of cells, or sometimes we say is an aggregate. When we say aggregate, it comprises of what? More than one. So they are aggregate of similar cells. That is, cells that looks alike, that come together, that are working together to perform a specific function. I get now. They are what? They are aggregate of similar cells that work together to perform a specific function. That is, they have their own function that they need to perform in the body of a living thing. So before they could perform this function, similar cells must come together in order to what? In order to perform that specific function. I'll get it now. And the third one is when we now talk about what? Is the organ. In the aspect of organ are what? They are multiple tissues, or we can say an aggregate of what? Of tissues, and not just ordinary tissues, aggregate of what? Of similar tissues that comes together in order to what? In order to perform a specific function in an living thing. So when tissues, when they come together, not just ordinary tissues, similar tissues that they look alike, that they are ready to perform a specific function. When they come together to perform a specific function, they are regarded as what? Organ. Again now, so that is just what? That's the aspect of organs. They are what? They are multiple tissues. And the fourth one, then we now talk about what? Organ system, or it can also be regarded as what? The system. So in the aspect of the organ system, these are multiples of organs, or the aggregates of similar organs that comes together to perform a specific function. That is why in a living thing that are multicellular in nature, we have what? Various systems. Like we have the digestive system, we have the respiratory system, we have the nervous system, so we have the reproductive system. So inside the reproductive system, we have various organs. Inside those organs, we have what? Various tissues. And inside those tissues, we have various cells. Now, not just ordinary cells, similar cells. And the last one is what? The individual. So in the aspect of individual, so when different organ system combines together to form a whole entity, that's when now have what? An individual. Again, so let's now make a brief analogy about what? About level of organization. So a cell can be regarded as what? Students. A tissue can be regarded as what? Just a classroom. An organ can be regarded as what? Grade level, just like we have the whole of SS1. And a system is regarded as what? The whole school entirely. So that's what we now talk about, what? Levels of organization. Then we move on to binomial nomenclature. From the word bi means two. Nomia means name. And nomenclature now refers to as what? The system of naming. So every organism has its own what? Its own given name. So, and that is all referred to as what? Binomial nomenclature. And the father of binomial nomenclature is no other person than what? Carolus Linnaeus. This man gave name to every living thing that we have in existence, and he gave them to us. That even in human being we have what? Two names. Are you getting it now? So that is the aspect of what? Binomial nomenclature. And the name given to organism is derived from two words, from the genus and from the species. So species is a group of organisms that can reproduce to produce fertile offspring. That is, species are organisms that can reproduce organisms of their likes. So that is the simplest level of what? Of organization of life. So that is the aspect of what? Of the binomial nomenclature. And what brings about the system of naming, that's what we refer to as what? The hierarchy of classification, which comes with the kingdom, the phylum, the class, the order, the family, the genus, and the species. So let's have a brief example of the binomial nomenclature of human beings. They belong to the kingdom of what? Of Animalia. They belong to the phylum Chordata. Why? Because they have backbone. They belong to the class of mammals. Remember when we talk about what? Kingdom Animalia in our previous lessons. And they belong to the order of what? Of primates, because they have a what? A straight backbone. And they belong to the family of Hominids. They have the genus of Homo, and they have the species of Sapiens. So, and this binomial nomenclature of man is now gotten from what? From genus and species, and this makes man to be referred to as what? Homo sapiens. So every human being has this scientific name of Homo sapiens, and there are some rules that govern in the naming of organisms. There are some rules that govern the naming of what? Of organism. That the first letter of the genus should start with what? With a capital letter. And now looking at the first one, that the species name also starts capital letter, has already made the naming very wrong. And the second one, even it starts with small letter, but what? It was not in italics, neither was it underlined. It has also made the naming very wrong. And the third one is the Homo, which is the H, starts with capital letter, and the S starts with small letter, but it was an italic form that has qualified the writing of the Homo sapien to be what? To be very correct. And this will now lead us to what? To the rules that governs the writing of binomial nomenclature, which is what? The system of naming. So in the system of naming, there are some rules that governs the system of naming. And remember, we have two names. We have the first name, and we have the what? The generic name, which is the genus and the species. And the genus can also be called what? The generic name, while the second name, which is the species, can also be what? The specific name. Now let's take an example of butterfly, which has the scientific name of Dinops perplispus. So the first rule says genus name must go first, which is what? The generic name. The genus name must be the first name to be written, and the genus name starts with what? With a capital letter. That is, it must be capitalized. I get now. So that is the second rule of what? Of binomial nomenclature. And the third one is specific name, which is the species name, is never capitalized. Even the first letter there is always what? Is always small letter. And the last one is the entire name is in italics or it is underlined separately. And now we move on to what? Complexity. Every organism, they show their level of complexity, that is from one form to the other. We cannot compare how complex a goat is to what? To that of an amoeba. So that shows what? The level of increment in their what? In their level of life. Then we now talk about advantages and disadvantages of complexity. So number one, we talk about what? Specialization of tissues, organs, of or system, and thereby this brings about what? High efficiency in what? In such an animal. So you cannot compare animal that has the system that they will function to animal that has just only one cell. Number two, we have division of labor exists among the body parts, which ensures efficiency. So in the organism where we have what? Various systems, each system performs its own function. I get now. So in that aspect, and the third one, we have a particular body function does not adversely affect all other functions. Why? Because they are independent of each other. And number four, organisms can live in different habitats. Due to complexity, they are suited for different habitats. And what's an habitat? The home of organism. And the fifth one is reproduction does not lead to what? Disintegration of what? Of parents. Even though they give birth to young ones, but the parents, they are never or they are never separated from what? From their young ones. Then we talk about the problems or disadvantage of complexity. That is, need specialized system to transport materials such as gas. So they need a specialized function. And number two is that they require more foods. So more food are consumed. Why? Because they show higher complexity in what? In their organization. So I hope you've learned a lot from this lesson, which is the levels of organization, where we talk about the cell, the tissue, the organ, and the system. And we also talk about what? Binomial nomenclature, which is what? The system of naming. And we also talk about complexity. Thank you for listening, and see you in our next class. Bye for now. Bye.